This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another session of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I am your host. And today we have a returning guest. We have Kyle Lai, who's back again to talk to us. His company is KLC Consulting. And before we get started, Kyle, do you want to tell us anything about you or your organization?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm with KLC Consulting. KLC Consulting has been in business about 20 years, and we are C3PL candidates in the CMMC. So that means that we will be able to start assessing companies for CMMC after certified by DoD. And we've been focusing on helping defense contractors for cybersecurity compliance, CMMC, NIST 800-171, DFARS. So a little bit about myself. I'm the President and Chief Information Security Officer at KLC Consulting. So been in cybersecurity for over 20 years. Been a practitioner in CMMC, NIST 800-171, and DFAR clauses 12, 19, 20. Previously, I was a security advisor for a number of companies like ExxonMobil, Zoom, Fidelity Investments, Boeing, Microsoft, but also a operations manager for Defense Information System Agency, the DISA. So I was operations manager for Cybersecurity Portal, who is the predecessor of Cyber.mil. So also a former Chief Information Security Officer of Pactera, one of the Blackstone-owned global IT company, and the Brandeis University Heller School. So really glad to be here.
Wow, that's great. Oh, you have quite a little history there. All right, well, today we have a very interesting topic. So we're going to talk about ransomware, which is very appropriate for everything that's going on right now. So let's start with our first question about what are the ransomware trends that are happening today?
Sure. Yeah. So ransomware, from the ransomware report from Sophos and Cybereason, so far in 2021, there has been more than doubled number of ransomware attacks compared to 2020. Right, 37% of all the medium-sized companies have been attacked by ransomware. 32% of the victims actually paid the ransom, right? And maybe because they do have a cyber insurance to cover this. Right? And the 40% of the ransomware attacks actually happen here in the US. Right? 29%, this one is interesting, 29% of the victim actually recovered less than half of their data after paying the ransom, and only 8% of the victim actually paid the ransom, got all their data back. So yeah, it doesn't mean that you pay for the ransom, you get all your data back. And this one is more alarming. 80% of the ransomware victims actually get hit again with a ransomware, right? So yeah, because they probably have not protected them really well after the initial ransomware attack. They usually have multiple extortions in one ransomware attack. So there usually is a extortion for getting the decryption key so you can get your data back. And they will actually get you another extortion for, hey, do you want to destroy the stolen data, right? Otherwise, we'll probably post your data to a public site. And then if you decide not to pay for the ransom, these attackers, they will go after your suppliers and their customers and telling them that, hey, your firm actually got attacked by ransomware and your firm choose not pay, so that's why we come to you, the suppliers and customers. So they're trying to embarrass you and try to get you to pay. So these are just some of the tactics that ransomware attackers are using. So the scale of the ransomware attacks is getting bigger and bigger. Right, just the past weekend, you heard about the July 4th weekend, 2021. Right, REvil, the ransomware gang, actually attacked the software companies Kaseya, right? And Kaseya is the software that's used by companies to manage IT supports. So our REvil actually also attacked the JBS Meatpacker back in June 2021. So they are actually a very active gang. So what it is Arrival actually announced that there is 1 million systems actually got impacted, from this attack, and they're asking for $70 million of ransom, right? So, and these are actually the largest ransom I've ever seen, and it seems like it should be one of the largest ransom out there, right? So you can see that ransomware is just getting bigger and bigger. And some of the more recent attacks, the victim who actually paid, you probably heard about Colonial Pipelines. They actually paid 4.4 million, right? JBS Meatpacker, they actually paid 11 million, right? Just June 2021. CNA Financial, they actually paid 40 million back in March, 2021. So yeah, the number of these ransom, they are just getting outrageous. Right. I mean, some of the people may ask, right? Should I pay for the ransom, right? And FBI actually suggested not to pay for the ransom because you are involved in the ransomware gangs and you are funding the criminal activities. In some of the states, they are discussing about putting regulations to prevent companies from paying the ransom. Right? The laws, the regulations, that's not in place yet. So for now, it's still business decision to decide if you want to pay or not, right? So if you do choose, if you want to make a decision to, if you're attacked, you want to make a, see if it makes sense to pay for the ransom amount that you've negotiated. You probably want to take a look at, hey, how much does it actually cost to actually get the decryption key from the attacker, right, to get your data back versus what is the time and money you will spend to recover your data, right? So that's like a good comparison. So, yep, that's just a little bit of the trends out there on the ransomware.
Yeah, those are some pretty big ransomware dollar amounts. That's crazy. And so when a company's deciding, like, okay, here we are, we're locked up, we're going to pay, we're not going to pay. If they're backing up their data, right, which I'm sure we're going to get into or something like that, so I don't want to jump the gun here, but just when they're going through the pros and the cons here of should we or shouldn't we, how long does it usually take before they come up with an answer of which way they think they should go?
Yeah, that's actually going to be in a little bit discussion. There should be a decision, right? There should be a plan on how do you actually make a decision. The easy answer, high-level answer is if it's actually going to cost you so much time, maybe 2 weeks, right, to actually recover everything, and every day you are losing $1 million, right? Yeah. Compare that to $2 million versus like how much does it cost to get how much do you actually have to pay to actually get the key and get your data back? So that's your comparison point.
Okay, and that kind of goes into the next question is the cost of recovery from ransom. What are if you decide, okay, we're not going to pay, what do you have to pay for it to get your data back?
Right. I mean, once you actually decide to pay or not pay, just say you actually have a, it really depends on the size of the company to actually determine the cost, right, of the recovery. So some of the ransomware gangs, they actually know the victims and they understand, what is the size of the company, the victim's company, right? So they know their business, so they will actually put their ransom, according to the size of the company. So the smaller firms, they probably will see the ransom in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? But if it's in the $1 million, in a medium-sized companies, based on the survey, we actually see the recovery after a ransomware attack is close to $2 million. I mean, back in 2017, right, there is a company, Merck, large pharmaceutical company, actually recovered from the 2017 NotPetya attack. They actually spent $1.3 billion. You can see from their 10K report, they actually have like $200-something million of expense on their cyber attack recovery every quarter, right? So yeah, so when you actually get into the large companies, the size of the recovery actually become very expensive. right? Just as a side note, right? So they do have a hidden cost for the recovery, right? For example, the cost of recovering the trust from your customers, and also the cost for getting your customer back, right? So there are those costs as well. Just want to touch a little bit on the cyber insurance. So,
yeah, that's what I'm just going to bring up. Yep, go ahead.
Right. So more companies are actually signing up for cyber insurance. Say cyber insurance, they do realize ransomware is a big problem, and that they don't really want to keep paying for the ransom, right? So they know they do have a problem as well. So most likely, you will see the cost of cyber insurance going up, and there is probably going to be more restrictions on how and when they're actually going to pay out the cyber insurance. So when you sign up for the cyber insurance, you probably want to look at the clause, look at the requirements a little bit more closely, because cyber insurance company, they do put in a little bit more clause in their insurance.
Yeah, they're definitely getting a lot more stringent on what you need to be doing in order for them to pay a claim. You know, when it first came out, it was kind of like, oh, you don't need to do anything. Anything happens to you, you know, we'll cover it. But obviously, as these ransomware attacks are happening and the cost is so expensive, that insurance is going to start to go through the roof. So, I mean, I think it may almost get to the point where it's something that's going to be extremely expensive to have cyber liability insurance. And a lot of these companies have never even thought about having it. And now by the time they finally do, it's going to be really expensive. So.
Right. They probably will put some kind of a requirement. Say if you want to sign up with cyber insurance, you have to do this type of security measures.
Mm-hmm. The new Department of Defense's cybersecurity program, CMMC, can be very confusing and overwhelming. A3 is a cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification. A3 builds CMMC packages and has access to a marketplace of consultants, RPOs, and assessor C3PAOs. A3 creates a roadmap for each cybersecurity requirement and helps break things down step by step. Please visit cyberdataintelligence.com/A3. All right. So how do you prepare for a cyber incident response plan for ransomware? Talk a little bit about incident response plan.
Right. Yeah, this one is a big one. So first of all, you should definitely have a incident response plan, right? Because when things go south, you know, things can be actually very stressful during the incident response plan, during the investigation and the incident response, right? So before I start getting into the detail, I can share a little bit of a real incident I have handled as an example. So in one instance, my team actually have to work 3 days and 3 nights at the client's office, right? Because they actually got hit with a cyber attack. And it was actually a big, fairly large law firm. And, you know, server actually went down, the email went down, a lot of systems actually went down, right? So it was a pretty stressful and a very intense situation. And in that situation, you don't have much information to start with. So you have to start with gathering all the facts, right? You have to gather the network traffic log, router switches, firewall, email server logs, and also like endpoint protection or the antivirus logs, right? So, and if you're using the cloud, you have to get all the cloud traffic information as well, the application log. Just try to get as much as information as possibly can, right? Then we actually perform the analysis based on these logs. Try to determine what is the root cause, right? Then you decide. Then you have to have a plan to decide on the actions, right? How do you actually make decision on the actions that you want to do next? And you know, and these are some of the actions is related to preventing the further attacks, right? And then you have to also during the decision you have to prioritize the task that you are doing, you know, because there are things that you're learning a lot about. What are the configuration that need to be done to prevent the attacks? So there could be change of configurations, the firewall rules, change of firewall rules, some of reconfiguration of the servers, right, and the investigation and the forensics. So these are just to decide what to do next, right? So and also after the analysis that we actually found the root cause. there was actually something on the firewall, that there was a misconfiguration on the firewall, which is a human error, right? Then we actually have to actually do the patching the firewall, reinstall some of the servers, right? Change the configurations of the domain controllers, and at that time, then we can start the recovery effort. Right now, we actually know we are not really under attack, because we actually have a firewall actually all blocked. Some of the attack vectors all kind of stopped. So then we can actually start the recovery effort, right? So get the files recovered, and during the time, we actually have all the IT, HR, the legal, compliance, and the leadership team all work very closely together during the 3 days and 3 nights. So it was pretty intense, right? So that's kind of give you an idea like what's going on during that incident. So you want to actually put together the incident response plan, right, ahead of time usually, and that usually should cover who is doing what, the roles and responsibilities, right? The key stakeholders, right? As I mentioned, there are IT, leadership, HR, business groups have to be involved, because they are the one that are running the business, right? There's the PR, the public relations, the communication team. They have to be ready, understand like what to communicate, right? There should be legal compliance team, law enforcement liaison, because when things getting big, you have to make sure you understand who you actually talk to in the law enforcement, right? Local or federal, right? And the cyber insurance liaison, and also in the plan, once you have the plan, you really have to train your staff. So you have to make sure they understand, right? In your plan, you want to define who you talk to in the press, right? Who is going to talk to the press and who communicate with the media, because you don't want to have just anyone talk to the media in that situation, right? And you have to define who communicate with the law enforcement and what information you want to communicate with them. Just a side note, if you talk to the FBI, that become a federal case. So before you talk to the FBI, you have to make sure you understand if you want to talk to them, right? Once you hand it over to them, it's federal, so there's no point of no return. You cannot take the case back, right? And and you want to have the process of assessing the situation, what we sometimes call triaging, right? Sometimes you have to understand how do you want to actually, when there are so many things going on, how do you actually triage and determine what is the situation, right? Decision making, you probably want to have the process for decision making, who and how do you actually make the decision. You want to have the process of identifying the root cause. You might not have all the information, but you want to find a process in terms of how do you actually want to do the root cause identification, root cause analysis, and remediation, right? And then there's a process of engaging. If things just are going out of hand, you don't have the capability. You want to have a process to engage the external incident response team to help if needed, right? And you want to also have the process for reporting the incidents to the authorities or the clients by contract. And for example, in our case, in the DFAR 7012, right, 252.204 7012, you have a contract. If you are on the federal contract handling CUI, most likely you will have this contract, have the DFAR 7012 on your contract. It will require you to report to DoD within 72 hours of the discovery of the cyber incident. Not saying that you have to know exactly what's going on, but just say you have to report within 72 hours of the discovery of the cyber incident or data breach, right? That's related to the CUI or impacting the way you deliver the contract, right? And also there are some other regulations that might require even shorter time frame. You probably want to know about them. Just for instance, like Colonial Pipeline, we talked about. After the Colonial Pipeline incident, TSA, the Transportation Security Agency, they actually require the oil pipeline companies to report the cyber attack within 12 hours, right, of the discovery. So you have to kind of know that kind, this type of regulations if you're in your specific business. And also the process for negotiating the ransom. If you do choose to use, to activate this option, then what is the process? Usually, I know not too many companies actually have the Bitcoin wallet, with them. Right? So usually you probably want to have some kind of a retainer with a law firm or some incident response company that will be able to actually negotiate the ransom and pay the ransom on your behalf, right? So these are type of things that you have to think about. And also when you have the process, what is the process for doing the forensics, right? Investigation, and how do you actually handle your evidence? Because when things are happening, if there are some really smoking guns, you have to really protect these evidence. How do you handle this evidence, right? And the process of recovery, that's a big one, right? So you want to make sure that you have a process in place. Once everything is kind of settled, you blocked all the attacks, starting the recovery, but what is the process? How do you determine the priority on what's the recovery process? This one is going to be important because now you have the incident response plan in place. How do you know if it's effective? You probably want to, what I usually will recommend is to do tabletop exercise or like fire drill, emergency drills, right? Just to make sure that you understand how your plan is working. And usually when we conduct this type of exercise with our clients, we usually find there are going to be some missing pieces, right? Or when you actually have some people just, hey, at this step, I don't know what to do. So you probably want to just document, hey, these are things that we can improve on, and then improve your incident response plan. So that's kind of at a high level in terms of what need to be done. There's one approach. It's called OODA, OODA. It's called OODA loop, OODA: observe, orient, decide, and act. Right. This is a kind of a methodology designed by the U.S. Air Force, right, to help people actually make quick decisions and effective decisions. Right. You first observe like what's going on, like kind of what we talk about. Gather all the information, kind of observe, get all the logs, identify what's going on. That's the observe, right? And orient. Once you have all the information, you kind of understanding what is the situation in that situation, in that orient phase. You want to kind of determine, be able to actually have all the information and be able to make your decision, right? And you want to kind of determine, are we actually for example, are we going to be handling this type of incident internally or externally? So you kind of have those type of reality check, understanding where you are, situational awareness. Then you want to decide. The third step is deciding, like what's going on, what's going to happen. Prioritize your steps, and some of the decision you probably want to think about is like, decision could be like, do we have enough information? The decision could be like, yeah, we need to get more information, right? Do we actually do the investigation? Do we call in the cybersecurity firm, right? So those are the decisions that you have to make, right? And the big one, do we actually report the incident? Is this the incident? That is a big one.
Yeah.
Right? Then once you have the decision, then you act, right? So OODA, that's the last step.
That makes sense. All right, now real quick. So what can you do to prevent this from happening in the first place?
Yeah. So it's not, there are so many steps, but I will give you kind of the high level, kind of the key things that company can do to prevent, right? So, so these are going to be aligned with White House. They actually provided the guidance for the ransomware protection prevention, and these all aligned with CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and the FBI's guidance as well. So these are, patching your system, right, as soon as possible, because ransomware gangs, they are known to attack the new vulnerabilities, right? So if there are something new, they will take the advantage and attack, right? And you want to implement what we call multi-factor authentication, right, MFA. Because nowadays ID and password, they are just not secure enough, right? You usually want to have a multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, right? You want to segment your network, right? So what I mean is that you separate from your business or business office network from your production network. For example, if you have manufacturing floor computers, segregate your regular business network from your manufacturing network. If you have an old computer that no longer supported, put them into a separate network, right? So if they are actually attacked, compromised, it's not going to affect the rest of the network. Network equipment, they are important. Separate them into a segregate network. If there are systems that are holding very sensitive information, put them into a separate network. So, and the next one is the what we call endpoint detection and response, or what they call EDR, endpoint detection and response system. So these are a little bit, I would say, antivirus on steroid, right? So these will be able to actually detect and be able to respond, and these will be able to provide all these information to your security information environment and the event management system, so you can see all the events going on and very quickly determine how the attacks happened, where it's coming, and then you can prevent it very quickly. And data encryption, right? You want to encrypt as much of your data as possible, because once you have the data encrypted, if it's stolen by the attacker, then you don't really care, because they are still encrypted. We talk about testing our incident response plan and make sure this is effective, because if something that ransomware attack happened, you will know what to do. And this one is also important. You want to conduct a independent penetration testing or vulnerability assessment. Why do we want to do that? Because companies usually don't know what they don't know, right? So penetration testing, you'll be able to find out some of the vulnerability that are exposed on the internet, which they don't know about. And lastly is backup, right? Make sure you have a effective backup. And how do you know if it's effective? You have to test, right? You have to test your backup and make sure that you test it and the backup is good, and that you have the effective process to recover the data. I mean, I've been in companies that they assume they have a good backup, but at the end they could not actually get the recovery process. They cannot recover that data they have backed up. So it was just useless at that point, right? So those are just some of the steps that we really have to. Those are the important steps, the critical ones.
That's a lot of good stuff to do to get ourselves organized. All right. Yes. So now CMMC, how is this going to help reduce ransomware?
Right. So all the things that we just talked about, all the steps that what we can do to protect ourselves, prevent self against the ransomware, these are actually all highlighted or specified in the CMMC. They're all part of the practice, right? So if we actually take a look at the CMMC and NIST 800-171 practice, you will see them. They talk about multi-factor authentication, right? Endpoint detection and protection, and the testing your incident response plan, right? We talk about that. Conducting vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, segment your network, apply the security patches timely, right? Implement the data encryption and testing your data backup and recovery process. So these are actually all in the CMMC and the NIST 800-171. So if you actually implement these CMMC and the NIST 800-171 practices effectively, you are going to be pretty well protected against ransomware attacks and other cyber attacks, in my opinion.
See, good stuff coming out of CMMC. See, positive.
It's not easy, but once you have them, all the practices implemented, yeah, you will be better.
Well worth it. Well, thank you very, very much for all that awesome information. That was really, really, really helpful. And I appreciate you donating your time here to help educate us on this ransomware. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we hope that you tune into the next episode of 123 CMMC. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC.